Good morning. Today's devotion is for Friday of Holy Week. We've been following generally the outline in this book, 8 Days of Glory. And today, on Friday, there's so much information that actually it's 2 chapters instead of 1. Thursday had 3 chapters. Friday has 2. We're going to condense it down and get 2 highlights and then a bit of trivia for you. And I hope that you'll enjoy that and it'll be meaningful for you today. Our reference today is from Mark chapter 15, verse 15, where it says, "Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them, and after having Jesus flogged, he handed him over to be crucified." Starting on Thursday night, the high priest, the priest, and all their co-conspirators had Jesus arrested in the garden, and then they had a mockery of a trial, and that continued on into Friday. Then on Friday, they delivered Jesus to Pilate, Pilate then to Herod, Herod back to Pilate. The priests were actually in defiance of God. You would think that they would have been the people who were pointing others to God, that they would have known God, they would have recognized Jesus as his son, but they didn't. And instead, they were the ones who were opposed to Jesus and who sought his destruction, even planning his death. It's hard for me to imagine that people with a religious background would actually sit around and plot the assassination of somebody simply because they disagreed with him or he was a threat to their particular religious system. But that's exactly what happened. The priesthood should have recognized him, but they didn't. Instead, they defied God by denying Christ. The lesson for us in the institutional church is that we should be careful to never become institutionalized. The church should always be the visible body of Christ in the world and should never get caught up in religion simply for the sake of religion. So we need to be careful about that, and that's a good warning for the modern church still today. Now, the second thing that happened was when Jesus was sent to Pilate. Pilate listened to him. He could find no problems with Jesus. He sent him to Herod because he couldn't find any reason for him to be guilty. Herod couldn't find any reason, sent him back to Pilate. And still, even though they both knew that Jesus was innocent, they condemned him to death. We know the story of Pilate washing his hands of the whole situation. Church tradition tells us that Pilate spent a great deal of the rest of his life washing his hands. In his elder years, it was 15 minutes every day trying to remove the stain of crucifying an innocent man. Here we find that the state has turned against God. The state has deserted God. Now we need to, I think, remember that in the time of Israel, the time of Jesus, and even before, back to David, and even beyond that to Moses, the state, the political and civic leaders also had a responsibility to lead the people to God. And here, this was being radically opposed. They led people away from God. They preferred to follow the crowd and to just give them what they wanted. So both the church and the state have deserted God. They've both turned against Christ. And I think both serve as a warning for us today. Even our state in our modern times should be a state, a government that directs us towards God, not away from him. And so we have very good warnings for us today. Now, here's a little bit of trivia for you. When Pilate decided to offer an option to the people, he brought Barabbas out before them. And Barabbas was chosen by the crowd. His name, Barabbas, is a 2-part name, and it would be equivalent to our last names. Bar, B-A-R, would have meant son, son of. And the rest of his name is built on Abba, which means father. And so his name was son of the Father. Now, tradition tells us, we don't always know if tradition is right, but let's assume that it was and is. His first name was Jesus. And so Barabbas' name was Jesus Barabbas. He was Jesus, son of the Father. Now, I don't know how much we can deal with this, but we can have fun with it and recognize that the man that was released had the same name as the man who was crucified. Think on that today as you consider this day when Jesus was crucified. God bless you.